Hello friends, thank you for watching this video. I am Mohamad and today I will be explaining to you how we can utilize Azure Storage, specifically Blobs, in our application. So what are we gonna be covering today? First, we're gonna start by getting all of the ingredients that we need to build our application. Second, we're gonna be discussing the Azure Storage and its features, and then we're gonna jump deep into what's Blob, file, queues, as well as table storage. We're gonna discuss the structure of our application, and then we're gonna start into coding. If you find this video helpful, please like, share, and subscribe. It will really help the channel. So, before we start, what do we need? We need an Azure account. We can have a free lifetime Azure account, and as well we can get $200 for the first month, so we can utilize. Second, we're gonna need the .NET SDK. We're gonna be utilizing the SDK to build our application. And finally, our code editor will be Visual Studio Code. All of these links will be available in the description down below. So, first of all, what is Azure Storage? Azure Storage is a highly scalable service that's available for us from Microsoft on Azure platform. It allows us to store files, images, tables, videos, and all type of unstructured data. Azure Storage basically consists of 4 features: blobs, files, queues, as well as tables. So we're gonna jump into every single one of those details, but before we do that, let's discuss Azure Storage features in general. So Azure features are durable because they have high availability across data centers and they are managed by Microsoft. They are secure because all of its data is encrypted. They are scalable because we can utilize a lot of the data center in order to scale across regions, or we have different availability as well that we can utilize. They are managed, it's a managed service, so all of the infrastructure is managed by Microsoft on the Azure platform. And finally, they are accessible because we can utilize API and SDK, so we can integrate with them directly from our applications. So now let's start with blobs. So what are blob storage? Blob storage is a service for storing large amount of unstructured objects in our in the cloud. So we can utilize the blob storage to expose data publicly to the world, or we can store them privately. So common usage of blob storage include storing images and documents. As well, we can use it in order to stream videos and audio. We can use it as well for recovery and data backups. As well, we can use it for like long-term backups as well. So what is the structure of a blob storage? The structure of a blob storage is quite simple. So basically, we have first our account, which is gonna be our resource that we create. And the way we organize blob storage is through something called containers. Containers, we can think of them as like unique folder. On the computer, we can find it as C, D, E drives. So containers, we can think of them of like drives, and inside those drives, we can have files. And we can separate those drive or separate this container into logical containers. So as we can see from this demo, we have like an image container, a video container, generic files container, and miscellaneous container, for example. Apologize, I misspelled container here. So and we can see, for example, that we can store only files. We cannot store folders, and within those folders we can store files. It's just simple files within those containers, and it's a very simple structure to follow. Second, file storage. So file storage is a service that allows us to fully manage and share stuff on the cloud, and they are accessible. So it's simple as that. It's very simple to the blob storage. The main idea behind it is it's accessible via SMB, which is server message block, as well as NFS, which is the network file system. The one thing is about the storage file that's separated from blob files, as we can see from this diagram here, is within a file structure. Instead of containers, we have something called a share. It's share the same basics, so it has also, we can also think about it as it's like a drive within a computer, but the main difference lie here. So within a file, we can actually store folders, and within those folders, we can store files. So we can organize our files inside a share. When it comes to blobs and containers, we cannot do that. We can just dump the files in the container without any organization. But when it comes to files, we can actually create folders, and from there we can actually put files inside those folders. So when do we choose blobs and when do we choose file storage? It's very simple. If we decide to use the lift and shift methods, we need to use file storage because it's not implemented by the blobs. But other than that, we need to use the blobs because they are way more mature and way are more stable than files. The next topic that we're going to be discussing is the queues. So what is storage queues? Storage queues, basically it's a service that allows us to send information from point A to point B. I have already made a video about Azure Service Bus, which explains queues in way more details. If you want to watch it, I'll put the card on the upper right hand side. But basically it's a way for us to send information from point A to point B, and we are able to have more consistent messages, and we're allowed to have certain type of applications so they are able to read the queues and utilize the information inside of it. So let's look at the structure of a queue. As we can see, queues are utilize as well the resource, and inside the resource we can have as many queues as we want, and inside every queue we're going to have messages, and every message is basically composed of a JSON file, and this JSON file contains all of the information that we need to process this message. So basically once a message arrives to the queue, it will go into a first in first out approach, and the service that's going to be reading the queue it's gonna take this message, that's gonna serialize the JSON object and do whatever it needs with this object. And once it's finished, it's gonna remove the message from the queue and it's gonna jump to the next one. Again, I have made a video that explains the queue in way more details with Azure Service Bus. If you're interested, I will leave the description in the description down below. Sorry, I will leave the link in the description down below. So that's simply the queue. So next, we're going to be discussing table storage. So what is table storage? Table storage, in essence, it's a NoSQL data store where we can store large amount of structured data. And this NoSQL database can be used to get authenticated information from within Azure or from outside Azure. And it has a lot of accessibility features which we can integrate with it from different SDKs and APIs, so we can save this data and pull the data out of it. So what are the common usage of this table storage? The main usage is to store data, structured data that's going to be used for web applications or different type of web services. So what are the common use cases? We can use it in order for us to store large amount of data to serve our web application. We can use it as a high availability data store for different type of web services, as well as we can use it as a normal database. So let's take a look at the structure of our table storage. Again, everything relies around to having an account or a resource on Azure. And after that, we can see that we separate them into tables. So every table storage is unique to a table. So we can create as many tables as we want. And every table will contain the records. And since these records are mostly going to be a JSON object because they are based on NoSQL database. Now that we have covered the different types of Azure storage that we have, let's now discuss our application structure. So what are we going to create? We're going to create an application that's built on ASP.NET 5, and then we're going to create a service which is going to integrate with Azure Blob Storage, which is going to allow us to read information from the storage, upload stuff to it, as well as get certain files based on their names, as well as delete stuff from the blobs. It's going to be a simple application, but it's going to illustrate the power of blob storage, as well as gonna give us a lot of information on how we can integrate with them from our application. Now let's start coding. The first thing we're gonna do is we need to find our terminal. And then within our terminal, we need to make sure that we have the .NET SDK running. So we type .NET -- version, and we can see we have .NET version 5.0.103 installed on our machine. If you have any other number, which is fine. If you have any text or any error, you need to re-download the .NET SDK and reinstall it. So now that we have made sure that our .NET SDK is up to date, it's time for us to create our application. And for that, we're going to be utilizing the .NET new keyword, .NET new MVC, and we're going to call the application Blob Sample App. Blob Sample App. This should take a few seconds. Oh, sorry, I forgot to put dash on for the name. Okay, this should take a few seconds. Perfect. So now once that has been created, now let's navigate to that folder and let's open it in our code editor. Okay, great. So first thing, let us open the terminal. And let us build the application. So we're going to use .NET build, and it should take a few seconds. And as we can see right now, build has succeeded. Perfect. So the next thing that we're going to do is we need to add a new kit package in order for us to utilize the Azure Storage. How do we do that? We're going to utilize the .NET add keyword. So .NET add package. The package name is Azure.storage.blobs. This should take a few seconds as well. Perfect. Now we have it installed. We can verify that it's installed by going to blobsample.csproj, and we can see the package has been referenced here. Perfect. So next, what we need to do is we need to start by adding our blob service. So in order to do that, in the root directory of the project, let's add a new folder. We'll call this folder services. And inside this folder, we're going to create a new interface, and we're going to call it iBlob service. Perfect. And within this blob service, we're going to be defining 4 functions we're going to be utilizing. So the first one is going to be task string. It's going to be called get the blob. So basically we're going to be this function is going to return for us the URL for the blob. We're going to request the name and the container. Perfect. The second item, the second function is going to be all blobs. So tasks enumerable of type string and all blobs, and we're just gonna get request the container name. Let us fix these references. Perfect. So the next function is uploading a blob. So task is gonna return a boolean, and I'm gonna call it upload file blob, upload blob, and it's gonna take a name. It's gonna take an iForm file. Gonna call it file, and we're gonna define the string for a container name. And lastly, we're gonna define the delete. So task, it's gonna return a boolean. It's gonna be delete blob, and also it's gonna take a name as well as a container name. Perfect. So once we have the interface ready, it's time to implement the actual service. So within the services folder, we need to create a new class, and we'll call this class Blob Service. And let us inherit from the iBlob service, and now it's gonna request us to implement the interface. Perfect. And once we do that, now we haven't implemented them, we just created the class and we inherited from the interface. I think right now what we need to do is let us create the account on Azure, and let us create the Blob service on there, and then we can come back here and resume working on our application. So we need to navigate to our web browser. I have already made it open, and once you log into your Azure Portal, you're gonna see this. So what we're gonna do is we need to click on create a resource, and here we need to look for storage account, and we can see that we only have one result. We need to click on it, and then we need to click on create. We need to create a new resource group, so I'm gonna call mine YouTube, if I can spell YouTube. Okay. And then the storage name account, I'm gonna call it, let us call it YouTube. Oh, let's call it, yeah, YouTube ML sample. Okay, I'm gonna choose South UK South. Okay, perfect. As for the performance, since this is only a demo, we're gonna go with the standard one. The kind of storage we want. So as we can see here, we have general purpose v2, we have storage v2, we have storage, and we have blob storage. Storage is the old one, and the blob storage is very dedicated for blobs. We don't want any of these. We're gonna choose storage v2. And for the application services, we're gonna be choosing local redundant storage instead of anything else. Basically, even with the local redundant storage, we're gonna have high availability no matter what. And since this is a demo, we don't really need other than that. But in real world application, it would really be beneficial if we choose, for example, redundant storage. So basically, the storage will be duplicated on different geographies. So let's say it will take a data center within the EU, and it will duplicate it with another data center within Asia or the US. So it's not limited only by geographical location. In case that data center in that region stopped working for any reason, you have your data available within other geographical region. So for example, within the EU, we can have like UK South, UK North, for example, and different locations within the EU. But if for any reason the EU data center stop working, the data will not be available. But if we have geo-redundant storage, this means that the data will be copied to the US data centers or the Asia data center, and it will be automatically picked up from there. So, but for our purpose right now, we're just gonna use locally redundant storage. After that, we're just gonna click on review and create. We don't really need to configure anything else. Or before we do that, we don't really need to do any of that. Let's us go to review and create, and once that's ready, we're gonna click on create. This should take, I think, roughly around a minute. And while this is building, let us just do a quick refresher on what is a blob storage. So let me just go to draw.io. And just to do a quick summary on what is a blob storage. So as we said, okay, so let's create it. I don't want to save it now. Okay, so just to do a quick refresher, what are we gonna do is let's use a service, say web server. Okay, service, and let's get, for example, any service icon. Let's use this, for example. So this is a service, and for example, this will be our Azure account. This will be our storage account, Azure storage account. And within our Azure Storage account, we're going to be utilizing the blobs. So as we said before, the way that we organize blobs is via containers. So containers will be something like this. We'll call it video containers. We'll call it, for example, images containers. Or for example, it could be confidential container, anything we want. So, and once we have this linked up, for example, like this, like this, like this, and like this. Once we have these linked up, how do we save stuff here? They're gonna be files. So let's take any random file. So here they're gonna be saved as files. The thing with blobs is we don't have folder structure within container. Everything is gonna be within the root directory of the container. So we're gonna have here multiple files, and that's how we store it within a blob. And these will be the same for all of the 3 other containers, for example, that we have. Yeah, something similar to this. And let's copy these. Something like this. So basically within our Azure Storage account, we're gonna have different containers for different purposes. And within every containers, we're gonna have different files. And all of the files, they're gonna be on the root or the same level. We're not gonna have any folder structure within the files. Okay, now let's go back to our Azure account, and we can see that deployment has been completed. Let's click on resources, and we can see that we have our YouTube sample storage account has been created. And what we're gonna do now is we're gonna create a container. So right now we are here on first step, and now we're gonna create a container. So let's create a new container. We don't have any container out of the box, so let's create ours. And let's name the container, for now, let's call it images. You can name it whatever we want. And for the demo purposes, we're gonna put it on Blob, but the best case scenario in production, it could be on private, so you can generate access tokens in order for you to be able to access the so you are able to access the images, or basically to able to access the container images. So let's put it on Blob, and we don't really need anything here. Let's click on create, and once we go here, we can see that our container doesn't have any file, which is the expected behavior. So what we did right now is first we created the Azure Storage account, then we have created the container, images container to be specific, and now we are ready to upload all of the files to those containers. Perfect. So after we do all of that, the next step for us is we need to get our access key. So how do we do that? The access key basically is the connection string that we're gonna be utilizing in order for our application to be able to communicate with the Azure services. So how do we do that? Let's go back to our root directory. Let's go back one more step. So let's go back where it says our storage account, and from here we have on the left hand side under settings we have access keys. If we click on them, we will be able to see that we have key 1 and key 2. So there's multiple ways for us that we can connect with our storage account, but for this purpose right now, I think the easiest way for us is to utilize the connection string. So let's click on show keys, and let's copy our connection string. Once we did that, let's move back to our code editor, and within our app settings, let's create a new field. So after here, we'll just make sure we have a comma, and we'll call this blob connections. And then here we're gonna be pasting our connection string. Perfect. So now that we have got the connection string and we add it to our app settings, the next step is for us to inject this into our startup class. And after we inject this to our startup class, we need to inject the service. So how do we do that? Let us go to our startup class, and here under the under the configure services method, we need to add the following. So first of all, we need to get the connection string that we have saved under the app settings.json. So for that, we're just gonna create a variable. We call it var, we call it blob connection equal configuration dot get value. It's gonna be a string, and I think we called it blob connection. Yeah, let's copy this and let's paste it here. Perfect. So the next step is we need to inject it. So it's gonna be services. We're gonna basically inject the blob service client into our dependency injection container, and we're gonna pass the connection string to it. So for us to do that, we need to call services dot add singleton, and from here we're just gonna use the lambda expression, and we're gonna declare a new blob service client, and then we're gonna pass the connection string, which is gonna be blob connection. Let us fix the references. Perfect. So let us just do a bit of comments here, injecting the connection string from the app settings and injecting the blob service client into our DI container. Perfect. So what are we gonna do after that? We just need to initialize our service that we created here. This is the blob service and the blob service into our DI as well. So how do we do that? Let's add a comment, inject the blob service into the DI container. So in order for us to do that, we're just gonna call services dot add singleton, and it's gonna be blob service blob service, and that's it. And now let's fix the references. Perfect. Now the next step, it's gonna be updating the blob service so we can take advantage of the blob service client that we have just injected here. So let's jump back to the blob service, and the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna start by injecting it using the constructor. So private read only blob service client, it's gonna be blob client. Let's fix that reference, and then we need to create a constructor, and it's gonna take blob service client blob client, and here it's gonna be underscore blob client equal blob client. Perfect. So once we have the blob service client ready for injected into our constructor, we can use it in all of our methods here. So the first method we're gonna work on is getting all of the blobs. So how do we do that? First, we need to remove this. We need to make this function async. Perfect. So we need first to get access to the container, and since we are already passing the container name here, we can use it to initialize that container. So var container client equal underscore blob client dot get blob container client, and we're gonna pass it the name, which is gonna be container name. So basically this one, it's gonna allow us to access the data inside the container. So let us refresh what is a container. So here, what is a storage container? So here, as we can see, these are the containers that we are trying to access. So this code here, blob client and get the blob container client, it will allow us access to this container. We have passed the name of the container we want to access. So right now the container client is basically our key to get all of these files here within this container. Perfect. So the next step is, since we're going to be getting all of the blobs and we're going to be returning a list of string, which is basically the names of the blobs, we need to create a new list of strings. So we're going to do var, gonna call this files equal new list of string. Perfect. And after that, we're gonna just get all of the blobs. So var blobs equal container client dot get the blobs async. And basically this will allow us to fetch directly and get all of the files that we have here. So the next step is we need to stream these files into our machine, and so we can get their name and save them into our list. So we're gonna use the await for each var item in blobs, and then what we're gonna do files dot add item dot name. So basically we're just connecting directly to the files inside our blob. We're getting the every file we're getting, and then we're getting that file's name. The reason we did await here, because blobs right now is in an async state, and we need to stream that file in order for us to get the name of it. So since it's in a streamable state, we cannot directly access it. We need to await until it's like available for us to use, and then we can access the name property of it. Once we do that, the next thing is we're just gonna return the files back to the user. So return files. Perfect. So right now this is our all blobs method. The next one, let's us do the get the blob, which is also gonna be very simple. So let us first delete this and let's make this function async. So first of all, as we did before, we need to get access to our blob container. So var container client equal blob client to dot get, and then we're gonna pass the container client container name. Get blob container client. Perfect. So right now, once we did this, we're actually gonna get the blob client right now. So basically right now we got access to this. Now we need to get access to a specific file. So how do we do that? We call it var blob client equal container client dot get the blob client, and then we're gonna pass the name. So basically here, let's add comment. This will allow us access to the storage container, and this will allow us access to the file inside the container via the file name. Okay, so we're passing in this function the file name that we want to get, and we're utilizing that file name in order for us to get the file, that file in specific. And once we do that, we're just gonna get the URL of that file so we can return it. So return blob client dot URI dot absolute URI. Perfect. So this is the function for us to get the blob URL so we can display it. The next step for us, before we do that, let us just mention another thing. So at this moment, I'm just getting, because I know I'll be uploading images or videos, I'm just getting images in specific. I'm just gonna get the URL so I can directly display them. But let's say you're uploading videos, you're uploading some kind of other files. What you need to do is, the better approach is, you can download those files and then you can utilize them. So you can download them as a stream and then you can utilize that stream any way you want. If you're interested in this, please let me know and I will create another video complementary to this, so we can see how we can actually download the file. So after this, what we're gonna do is we're gonna work on uploading the blob. So let's make this function async, and let us delete this. And right now, because we're gonna be uploading similar to what we did before, we need to have the container client. So var container client equal underscore blob client dot get the blob container file dot the blob container. Okay, and we're gonna pass the container name. Great. And I apologize, see, it should be like this, equal. Perfect. So the next step after that is we need to get the actual name of the blob. So let us write this code and then we'll explain it. So var blob client equal container client dot get the blob client, and we're gonna pass it the name. So as you can see here, we are getting the file before, although we know that the file doesn't exist. What does that mean? So currently when we want to upload a file, basically what we are doing is, let's copy this. Basically we're creating like a temporary file, and we're saving that storage space inside our container for that file to fill. So right now here, this line here, basically it gets the file name. It will check if this file exists or not. If this files exist, it will be ready to replace it. If this file doesn't exist, it will put like a temporary file inside our container, and it will allocate its name for it. So here, it's basically checking if the file exists. If the file exists, it will be replaced. If not, if it doesn't exist, it will create a temp space until it's uploaded. Perfect. So once we have created this temporary space, now we need to prep the blob client for it to upload. So how do we do that? So first of all, we need to tell the blob client, okay, what type of file are we trying to upload? So in order for us to do that, we need to get the content type. And how do we send it? We send it via the headers. So we put var http headers equal new blob http headers, and we need to fix the references. Let's fix them. And then here we're just gonna specify the content type. It's gonna equal file dot content type. Perfect. So once we have specified the header, and the next step for us is to actually upload the file. So how do we upload the file? Basically, we're gonna put create a variable result equal await blob client dot upload async, and we're gonna pass it the file dot open stream. So basically what we're doing here, we're taking the file which is of type iform file, and we're converting it to an open stream which is of type stream, and this stream is being uploaded directly to the blob storage. And after that, we just need to send back the HTTP headers as well, and that's it. So now we have uploaded the files to our storage. Let us now check if this file has been uploaded successfully. So what we can do is we can see if res is not equal to null, it means that it has been uploaded. This is the simplest way. We can delve more into the results, but for now let's do it like this. Return it true. Return it true. Another way we can do it is we can go res dot value dot For example, check the version ID for it, and if it has a version ID, we can make sure that it has been uploaded successfully. But for now, we're just making sure that the object is not null. And in case it wasn't null, we just need to return a false. In case it failed, we're just gonna return a false to let the user know that it has failed. Perfect. So now this is our blob function. And the last function that we're gonna do is deleting the blob, which is gonna be also very easy. First, we're gonna make it async. We're gonna delete this. And similar to what we did before, we're gonna create a container client equal underscore blob client dot get blob container client, and we're gonna pass it the container name. Perfect. And after that, it's gonna be also very easy. We're just gonna get that blob client. So var blob client equal container client dot get the blob client, and we're gonna pass it the name. So again, just to summarize, this function will get us the file that we need. And lastly, we're just gonna return if this blob, we're just gonna delete it and return the result. So we're gonna put return await blob client dot delete if exist async. So basically this function is gonna check if this blob client exists. So if it's actually exists, it will delete it. If not, it will ignore it, and it will ignore this command and return false to the user. So because the file didn't exist. Perfect. So now we have our iService, iBlob service, as well as we have our blob service ready. Let us just build the application, make sure everything still builds. We're gonna use the .NET build keyword. This should take a few seconds. And now we can see build has succeeded. Perfect. We have some warnings. We can ignore them for now. So the next step after that is we need to start working on our controller. And basically our controller is gonna be how the user will be able to interact with this service. So inside our controllers folder, let us create a new class, and we're gonna call it blob files controller, and it's gonna inherit from the controller class. Let us fix the reference. Perfect. Now what we need to do is we need to inject this service here, which is the iBlob service, inside the blob files controller. So in order for us to do that, we're gonna do private read only iBlob service. It's gonna be a blob service, and let's fix the reference. iBlob okay, I misspelled service, I apologize. Okay, perfect. So the next step is gonna be public. Let's create a constructor, and we're just gonna pass the iBlob service using the constructor injection. Gonna make it a blob service, and from here it's gonna be underscore blob service equal blob service. Perfect. So now that we have injected the iBlob service inside our controller, the next step is for us to create basically the actions that we need. So the first action is going to be the index, which will allow us to get all of the blobs. So it's going to be HTTP get, and it's going to be a very simple public async task, because we're going to be calling the blobs, so it should be an async request, and it's going to return an iAction result, and we're just going to call it index. And within this, let's fix first the references, and basically it's going to be a very simple call to the blob service. So basically we're going to just get the list of files, which is going to be string equal await underscore blob service dot all blobs, and we're going to give it the container name. So what did we call the containers when we created it on the Azure portal? If we go back, if we go to the overview and we click on containers, we can see that the container that we have created, its name is images. So if we created, for example, another container, we called it video, we need to use the video keyword here. But since we have only one which is called images for now, we're gonna pass images. Perfect. And after that, we're just gonna return files to the view. Great. Let us now create this view and we see if it works. Basically, it should return us an empty list, but let us try it. So inside our view folder, let's create a new folder. We're gonna call it blob files. Oh, sorry, not a new file. We have to get a new folder. So new folder, gonna call it blob files, and inside this we're gonna create a new file. We're gonna call this index.cshtml, and basically the first thing we're gonna do is we're just gonna define the model, which is gonna be a list of string. And then, although we haven't created it yet, but let us first let's create a div class row. We're just utilizing a default bootstrap classes. Div class call-md-12, again bootstrap classes. We're just gonna add the create button, although we don't have it, the action ready, but we'll create it from now. So asp-action equal be create asp-controller. It's called blob files, and let's give it a class btn-success, so it will have a green color, and we'll call it add blob. And after that, we're gonna create another div of class. We'll call it as well call-md-12. And inside this class, we're just gonna create an ordered list, and we're gonna basically loop on the model inside this unordered list. So for each on the model itself, and inside of it, we're gonna create a list item. And inside this list item, we're gonna create a href. So basically, we are able to see this file. Yeah, let's do that from now. We can do asp-action. We haven't created this action yet, but we're just preparing it. So equal, I will call it a view file. Forgot the P here. Okay, asp-controller. I'm not sure why I'm not able to type today. I apologize. And then we have this called blob files, and then we need to pass the parameter for it. asp-route -name, for example. Yeah, name should be fine because we got the name from here, and it's gonna be basically at item, and this is gonna be called view. No, we're gonna just give it the name. So at item name, at item, that's it. And yeah, that's it. That should be fine for now. So let us build this, and let us run it using the .NET run. Now we can see it's running on port 5000 and 5001 for HTTPS. So let's go to this port. Let's navigate back to our web browser, and this will take us to the root directory, but let us direct to our blob files, and we can see we don't have anything because we don't have any files, and we have the button that we have created, which doesn't do anything because we didn't create that action yet. So let's go back here and let's create our add file action. So the create file action. So how do we do that? We'll navigate back to our, let's stop the application first. Let's navigate back to our blob files controller. Let's create a HTTP app-get, and let's create a new action, and we'll call this action public, we'll call it add file. So public action result add file. It's not gonna take any parameters and it's gonna return an empty view. Perfect. Let's create this view inside our views folder. So add a new file, add file.cshtml. Perfect. So let us work on the post and then we'll populate the view. So let's go back to our blob files controller. Now we need to create the post for this action. So we're gonna put HTTP post. Then we're gonna put public. It's gonna return, so it's gonna be async, so we have to put async task action result add file, and this one is gonna take an form file, call it file. So basically the form file is the file type that the view is gonna be able to send us so we can receive it. So once we added this, we need to make sure first the file is not null. So if we'll do some defensive programming. So if file equal null, or the file dot length is less than 1, we're just gonna return to the view. We're not gonna proceed with the request because it's an invalid file. Else, what we're gonna do is we're gonna get the name of the file. Actually, we're gonna generate a name that we wanna send to the server. So string file name. Actually, this could be a file instead of a string. No need for a string here. Equal. Let's utilize a GUID. New GUID. Okay. Okay. And let's add the extension of that file. So how do we do that? It's gonna be as simple as plus path dot get extension. We're utilizing the system.io in order for us to do that. It's gonna be file name, and yeah, that should be it. Tell you what, yeah, that should be fine. And after we do that, now we just need to call our blob service in order for us to start the upload. So we're gonna return the result to see if it's correct or not, and we're gonna await the request of the blob service dot upload blob, and we're gonna pass the file as well. Sorry, we're gonna pass the file name, and then we're gonna pass the file, and then we're gonna pass the container name, which is called images. And then we're gonna check on the response. So if it means successful, we're gonna redirect back to the action. So return redirect to action index. If it fails, we're gonna stay on the view. So return view. That's it. Okay, that's very simple. Let's now build the view before we can take it for a spin. So the view also is gonna be very simple for us to do. We're just gonna create a form class. We're gonna give it the basic bootstrap class, which is gonna be call -md-12. The method is gonna be post, and let's put it lowercase. Not sure it matters, but we can specify the action, which is gonna be add file. We're gonna specify the controller, which is gonna be blob files. And after that, we're just gonna add the most important part of this, which is the ink type, which is we're gonna tell this form that it's gonna accept files in order for it to be uploaded. So it's multi-part /form data. And after we do that, now all we need to do is add that input file and then the submit button. So let us use again more bootstrap classes. So div class form-group. This is gonna be input type file of class form-control. Basically again pure bootstrap classes, and we're gonna give it a name of file, because that name is used within the controller here. You see file, so it has to match. Let's close this, and the next step is let's copy this instead of typing it all over again, and let's close it. And right now here we're just gonna create the submit button. So it's gonna be button type submit, and we're gonna give it a class btn-success, and we're gonna give it the word add, and that's it. Now let's try to build it. .NET build, and then .NET run. Perfect. Now let's navigate back to our web browser, and let's refresh it. Add blob. Oh, here we call it the create. It should have been add file. So let's go back to the index, and instead of create it should have called add file. Okay, let's stop the application and run it again. Perfect. Let's refresh and let's click on it. Perfect. We can see that we have our input file. Let's select right now any images. Let's see here, I have this image for example, and let's click on add, and we can see it has been uploaded, and we have now the file name. So let's go check if it actually exists within Azure. So let's navigate back to our Azure portal, and let's open our image container, and we can see that we have our image here, and if we click on edit we can see that our image has been uploaded. Perfect. So now that we have checked that the file has been uploaded successfully, let us go back to our code. Actually, before we do that, let's go back to our code, and within our code here, the next step is we need to add the rest of the actions, which is going to be right now is to actually view the file. So we'll go back to the blob files controller. After this, we're going to create the view files action. It's going to be a get, so http get. Perfect. And then it's going to be public async task iaction result. Perfect. We're going to call it view file, and we're going to take the name as a string. And what are we going to do? It's going to be very simple. We're going to get the var res equal await blob service.get blob, and we're gonna pass the name, and the container is called images. Perfect. And then we're just gonna return redirect to res. So basically what we're doing here, we're getting the URL of the image which is uploaded on Azure, and we're just redirecting to it so it will open in the browser. Let's test this out. First, let's make sure that this is the action that we have added here into our index. Yes, so action view file. Perfect. Let's stop this, and now let's run the application again, and let's go back to our web browser. Let's refresh this, and if we click right now on this, it should theoretically take us to open this in a new tab. No, it should open this here within this tab and show us the picture. Perfect, that was what was expected. Now let's add a small enhancement just so it will open in a new tab. So we'll put target underscore blank. It will open this in a new tab. So let's stop this again and let's run it. And let's refresh this page. And if we click now, we can see it open a new tab. Let's add another image, just so we can have like a variety of images. And add, perfect, we have now 2 images. Let's add another one. Let's put this one and add, perfect. Now if we click on this, we can see it has been uploaded, and this as well, and the last one, this. Yes, these images are a preview of my next video about Docker, so stay tuned. Perfect, so now we have 3 files. The next step, the next action we're gonna implement basically is the last one, which is gonna be deleting a file, which is also gonna be very simple. So how do we do that? First, let's stop the application. Let's navigate back to our blobs file controller, and after this, we're just gonna add a simple delete. So this is not the best approach to make it in a get, but since it's a demo application, we're just gonna use the get functionality. Gonna put public async task iaction result. We're gonna call it delete file, and we're gonna pass a string name, and it's gonna be as well very simple. Await underscore blob service dot delete blob, and we're gonna pass the file name that we want to delete, and we're gonna pass the container name, which is images. And basically after that, we're just gonna return back to the index page, redirect to index to action, sorry, it's gonna be index. Perfect. So once we have add this here, let's update our index UI so it will have the delete button. So after this view, let's add a new button here for every item inside the li. We'll create a new link, asp-action equal, I think we'll delete file, yeah, delete file asp-controller is gonna be blob files, and asp-root -name. So basically, I don't think I explained this before, but the root -name, so the name here is the same as the name here. So basically, we're telling this link what are the query string. So after the root attribute, we're just adding the name, and the name here is the actual query string, and here is the value of it. So the value of it is gonna be at item, and let's give it a class of btn dash danger. So it will be red, and the user will give the user visual clue it's a dangerous button, and then we're just gonna put it delete. Perfect. So let's run the application again, .NET run, and let us go back to our browser and refresh. And as we can see, we have the delete button next to everyone. So right now, first, before we do any delete, let us check how many items do we have inside our container. We have 3 images. Perfect. Let's go back here and let's delete this let's check which is what. This is it. Let's delete this. Now it's 2, and if we come here and we refresh, we only have 2. Perfect. Let's create another one. Okay, this one for example, and let's upload it. So now it should be back to 3. Perfect. If we click on this, perfect. Now let's delete this, delete. If we go here, it should be 2 again. Let's delete all of them, and now we shouldn't have anything here. And now if we add 1, let's add this for example, add, and here we should have 1. Perfect. So now we have added all of our actions, and we have added all of our controllers. Let's do a quick summary of what we actually of everything that we did right now. So the first thing we did is we added the interface, which is the iBlob service. We defined 4 methods that we were going to implement: the get blob, all blobs, upload blob, and delete blob. And then we have defined the actual class, which inherits from the iBlob service, which implements it, So once we did that, what we did is we went to the Azure portal, we created the account, and we created the resource. And after we did that, we got the access key and we copied the connection string so we're able to access it. Once we have got the access key, we went back to our app settings. Inside the app settings, we created the default connection, which is blob connection, and we pasted the connection string. And then we updated the startup class. And once we updated the startup class, the first thing that we did is we got that connection string from the app settings. And then we injected a blob service client to our DI container, so it will be available anywhere within our application. And then after that, we injected our blob service that we have created in order for us to utilize it with anywhere within our application as well. Once we did that, now we started implementing the blob service. So first of all, we created the blob service client, and then we implemented one function at a time in order for us to implement that functionality. Once we did that, we just created this blob files controller, and we implemented every single one of them. So first we have injected the iBlob service that we have created using constructor injection, and then we created the index so we can see all of the blobs file. We created the add, which will allow us to add blobs, and then the view one, which will allow us to see every blobs the specific blob that we want to, and the delete one. One last thing which is nice to have is, let's add a link in the menu. So in the layout, let us create a new, so this one is called blob files, and the name of it's gonna be blobs, simple as that. I will save it, and now let's run it again, and let's refresh. So now the purpose of this, we just see a blobs here inside the menu, so it will be easier for us to navigate. Perfect. So now we see we have blobs, and once we click on it, oh sorry, we haven't updated the action, I apologize. So it should be an index here, save, and now let's run it again. If we go back, we refresh, and if we click on blobs, it will take us to that blob page that we have created. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please write any comment, any question that you have in the comments below, and like the video if you liked it. Again, all of the source code will be available for you in the description down below. Thank you very much. Have a good day.